everyone, Andrew from WiZDOM here with the second video in the What Should I Do Next series. In the first video, I just covered some basics about some really important considerations that I think you should think about before you make any decisions with regard to what is the next deal that's right for your situation in your property journey. Now, in this video, what I'm going to cover is a position that I'm referring to as starting out. So essentially here, we're talking about a relatively low income and a low amount of current available equity. So for no particular reason, I've just chosen an income of $40,000 and I have chosen a current available equity of $10,000. So immediately in my mind, I'm thinking of essentially younger people or potentially some people that have been through some fairly challenging times in their own situation. And as a result of that, their income's relatively low and their available amount of equity is relatively low. Now, of course, most people, if you went and said, well, I'm in this position, could I go and buy a property? The immediate answer would be no. If you went and saw a bank and said, well, how much could I borrow? The reality is particularly the $10,000 isn't going to translate very far with regard to a purchase price of a property. But the truth is that is absolutely not the correct answer. There are tons and tons of strategies that are available to people that are in a relatively modest financial situation. And personally, I actually like people, if I talk to my experience with many, many people's journeys over the years, it's really surprising to me that quite often the people that go the furthest when it comes to their property journeys often have the toughest starts. It's quite different to what you would expect in that most people believe that people that start their property journey or continue on their property journey from a wealthy position do the most and do the best. Well, that's not true. I have seen many, many people start with really modest financial situations. And because of that hard start, they learn to do great types of deals really early. And then they apply that experience and that understanding to the rest of their journey, which I think actually can translate to an accelerated journey in comparison to others. So a couple of points to consider here. One is that, look, the $40,000, if we were just going to go and buy a property, that would translate to roughly $200,000 that someone could take out as a loan. So theoretically, from an income situation, this person would be in a position to be able to do some form of loan or buy some form of property. Of course, what's the challenge here? The challenge, of course, is the current available equity of 10 grand. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about that. With regard to the 10 grand, it's not just because it isn't really enough money to be a deposit into any reasonable size purchase. But the other issue is that it really doesn't give us a lot of fat or a lot of available money to deploy our strategy. And one thing that's really important always is that we set aside from our current available equity whatever appropriate strategy is that we're going to apply. Now, there's a good reason behind that. Generally speaking, in a situation like this, we're going to be leaning more towards manufactured growth strategies than we are towards positive cash flow. As I explained in the first video, we really need to work hard to build this number up and then maybe consider good cash flow strategies that we could be looking at after we've done a few manufactured growth strategy deals and really boosted that number up as much as possible. Now, because it's a manufactured growth strategy deal, the reality is speed is really important. We want to be able to go into the property deal, execute on our strategy really quickly, and then obviously get to the end result of selling that property or whatever else we're doing with it at the end where we've applied all of that value, increased all of that value. It's really important to do that quickly. And in part of doing that quickly, the ability to pay for it as cash as you go is really important as well. Now, in lots of different cases, there's certainly plenty of theory as to where lenders might support various types of manufactured growth strategy. And it's true that if we're doing something like a construction, of course, we're going to be looking at bank funding to do that. But anything else that we're talking about, something like a quick renovation or even a significant renovation, a subdivision, or of course, any type of construction, to fund that through a bank is both going to be difficult. They're not very good at that, and it's going to take a lot of time. And we want time on our side. It's very important in manufactured growth strategies that our time frame is compressed as much as possible, because reality, holding cost absolutely kills manufactured growth strategy deals. So if you're in a situation like this, what are the types of deals that I'm thinking about? Well, in the manufactured growth strategy space, immediately my single biggest thing that I would come to is joint ventures. So what is a joint venture and how do you go about it? Well, just as you are in your situation, there are lots of people out there that are in the opposite situation. So for argument's sake, your situation may look like this, and so you're a little challenged on the financial side. Well, again, experience tells me that when you look at the wide world, there are actually people out there, many people out there, the complete opposite to you. So they might be in a great financial situation, but they could really struggle with the time to actually make property deals happen, or even the ability to find and execute on property deals generally. And so I find that if you can team up with a person that's in the opposite financial situation and work together on a deal, well, that can be a great outcome for both of you. You go in there as the deal finder, so you would be the one that would find the manufactured growth strategy. You bring the whole deal together, and they come in as the financial side. So they would be the ones that would be physically buying the property, and that's because obviously the bank's going to need to lend money, and of course they want them involved in that. So they'll be the ones that will buy the property. They'll also be the ones that provide the amount of money, whatever that looks like from your feasibility, to execute on the manufactured growth strategy as well. Now, I'm very big on joint ventures in manufactured growth strategies, specifically because they do have a limited lifespan. You are going into the deal, you're executing, and then of course you're generally selling the property, making the money. You would share that with your joint venture partner appropriately. You win, they win, and everybody's happy. When I get to talk about cash flow strategies, I'm not big on doing cash flow strategies as joint ventures. The reason being, as I explained in the first video, most cash flow strategies have no end date. It's the type of property where you would buy it and you would keep it forever. And what I find is generally in joint venture situations, when you put an unlimited time frame on a deal like that, over time, people change their minds, people's journeys go in different directions. And usually one partner will want to take the other partner out at some point, and often that is at a really inconvenient time, and no one's in a situation to do that. So as a result of that, whenever I'm talking about joint ventures, I'm absolutely usually specifically referring to manufactured growth strategies in a joint venture environment. So there are a few different types of joint ventures that we could be talking about. So the one that I spoke about then is where you would go out and find, let's say, a great renovation opportunity on a property. You would team up with someone in the opposite financial circumstance to you, and together you would make that deal happen. Now, that's if you were going to go out and just buy a property out of the marketplace. There's another type of joint venture which I think is really, really available, but absolutely underutilized, and that's in the form of a vendor joint venture. So here, what we're talking about is that you're still looking at a manufactured growth strategy. Say it's, lovely old Betty that lives on a great block or a great property in a great location anywhere in a capital city in Adelaide. Capital city anywhere in Australia, not Adelaide, where I'm from. So she's in a situation where she's getting older, the property's hard to look after, and you, by virtue of your research and everything else, you have identified that that property could be subdivided, and it could be subdivided relatively easily without knocking the house over and everything else. Well, there's a potential deal right there. Generally speaking, people that are advanced in age and have really great principal places of residence, often because the system was different a long time ago, she may be reliant wholly and solely on the pension, not have a lot of available capital, and not care about the fact that she would lose part of her property. In actual fact, it may be beneficial to her because she doesn't have to maintain it and look after it. So there's a great opportunity with your skill set, your experience and everything else to come in there, work with her to be able to make the subdivision happen, sell off the land. She gets a great return for that piece of land, and as a result of that, she actually has some money available to her in the bank. And of course, you get to earn a reasonable return on your your time, effort and energy as well. It's a genuine win-win situation. Others in the vendor joint finance area could be just something like, it's a property that is really run down. It needs to be sold off. Again, older people, they haven't had the money, time, or skill set to be able to improve the property. It's a great property to be renovated and sold into the marketplace. And as a result of that renovation, it would sell for way more money than it would in its current state. Again, a great opportunity for you to come in there, work on that, use your skill set, your time and experience, and be able to execute on that strategy for a great outcome for them and a great outcome for you as well. So vendor joint ventures, believe it or not, they're absolutely everywhere. The truth is, though, most people don't know about them. Many of these deals happen. It's just that they're not that common, and so people don't generally talk about it. The only deal that people understand is when they go and buy a property out of the marketplace. But I can assure you there's actually lots of great vendor joint venture opportunity out there, and it's a really brilliant way for not a lot of capital or very low capital. You can get yourself into a great deal with a great outcome. So from a manufactured growth strategy perspective, they would be the two key deals that I would be thinking about. Essentially here, you're not in a financial situation to go and buy a property yourself. So as a result of that, you really do need to work with others, be it in the form of just a financing partner that helps you get into a deal, or as I said, you can even work with the vendors as well. There are a few other very low or no money down type strategies that you could be looking at as well. So situations where people have got properties and a really hard situation and they just need to be taken out of that situation, and you might be able to go in there and absorb their responsibility and obligation. But those kind of strategies, in reality, I would want you to do a lot more education and get really a good understanding of how they work and good experience before you look to execute on that type of strategy. So it would be remiss of me not to at least talk about, well, could you do types of cash flow strategies in this financial situation? And absolutely you can. So here we're talking about cash flow strategies, essentially that are very low capital. We don't have an enormous amount of money available to us. And as a result of that, we need to make sure that our strategy cost is very modest as well. But a few different strategies that immediately come to mind for someone in this situation is probably a lease and lease. So just to understand what that deal is, a lease and lease is where you would lease a particular property, often in a good location with a number of bedrooms, and then you can manage that and sublease those bedrooms out on an individual basis. Now, of course, this is all within, local rules, council rules, state government rules, and everything else as well. And I would also say to you that you're doing that above board and honest, that in the sense of the landlord that is providing you the property, you're honest about that, and you're honest about the use of that. And of course, you need to secure that on a relatively long-term lease. This would be challenging to do, let's say, if you only had a 12-month lease, not impossible, but more challenging. And then you would be managing that, actively managing that to obviously rent that down on a room-by-room basis. But between the two, you may be able to rent a property, for argument's sake. Let's say it's a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom property, and you may be able to rent that property for $500 or $600 a week. But then each of those bedrooms may rent at a couple $100 a week, particularly where you'll often get the larger rooms will often rent for a little bit more. And even with the management costs and all of the operational costs, you can then make the difference between those. Now, of course, this is a bit of a cumulative strategy. So what I mean by that is that you may only make $100, $200, $300 out of one property. But if you continue to deploy that type of strategy, because it's a very low cost from a capital perspective, and you build yourself, 5 or 10 properties that you're actively managing, well, that can become a very interesting cash flow strategy for you with very low capital and obviously a fair bit of work involved in that. Another consideration is you can manage Airbnb properties on other people's behalf. And again, if this is something that interests you and it's something you may want to do more of in the future around your own property journey, in other words, creating great Airbnb properties in your own portfolio, well, this is a really good low capital way to start. So again, it's a very similar situation where a lot of people who want to have their properties out on Airbnb, they don't want to do the work, they don't want to do the management. And so as a result of that, there's great opportunity there to be able to work with them around securing their property and then managing it on Airbnb on their behalf. So again, works very similarly to the lease and lease, but in this case, you would be leasing the property off of them long-term and then Airbnb put the property out. Executive rental works very similarly in the sense of it works the same way as an Airbnb or potentially a lease and lease, but in this case, you would be leasing the property long-term, fitting it out at a very high level because you're attracting that executive rental, and then you'd be renting that on an executive rental basis as well. And essentially in all of these strategies, you are obviously looking to swap your time, effort, and energy and experience for the difference between that long-term rental and the higher rental that you can achieve on those shorter-term strategies. Now, one last deal, I guess, to consider, it's not really a cash flow strategy, it's more of a manufactured growth strategy, is that if you're amazing at research and amazing at doing feasibilities and putting deals together, well, of course, that's going to create great opportunity for you from a joint venture perspective, but you could also go the next step and effectively act as a deal finder. So you can identify and secure deals, and then potentially you could sell those deals to other people who are looking to invest and looking for great deals to do. And you can do that at a spotter's fee. Now, you do need to be careful about licensing. In some states, it does require that you are a licensed real estate agent to do this. But again, I've seen lots and lots of people who are just brilliant at getting out there, making deals happen and identifying deals, be able to collect, a good $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 spotter's fee, which of course a great investor is willing to pay. If you put a deal in front of them and they're going to be able to make great money and still be able to afford to pay your spotter's fees, well, there are lots of people out there that are willing to trade money for time, and as a result of that, be willing to pay you a deal spotter's fee on that. And so acting as a deal finder, I guess, is a very, very low capital way. It doesn't really cost you any money. It just costs you time, effort, and energy to get into the market and could be the next type of deal for you. Now, what I'll say is I say this with all strategies, and it doesn't matter about what your financial situation looks like. There are lots and lots and lots of different types of deals that you can do no matter what your financial situation looks like. And of course, because of that, it can be very easy to try and concentrate on too many strategies at once. So I encourage everybody, when it comes to that, pick the right type of strategy that you think fits with you best and really focus on that myopically, to the exclusion of everything else for a period of time. And I suggest a good 3 or 6 months. Put all of your energy into that strategy because it makes sense to try and get that strategy to come off. And if for any reason you can't, well, then after a period of 3 or 6 months of really focusing on that strategy and looking to get those deals to come off, then it may be time to consider changing your strategy and, executing or looking at different strategies instead. I find that is absolutely the best way for people to avoid what I refer to as wheel spin, where of course they're looking at too many things all at once. It all gets confusing, and unfortunately that translates to not getting traction on any strategy. And if you're not getting traction on your strategies, well, the reality is you're not moving forward with your property journey like we'd like to. So hopefully that was helpful as a starting out position and what that looks like. Really looking forward to bringing the next videos and all of the other positions to you soon. Until then, happy investing and bye.